The following Parkinson's Path podcast is provided by Leanna Marie with All About Parkinson's and Answers for Elders Radio.
And welcome everyone to Answers for Elders Radio Network. And we are here with an amazing guest, someone that longtime listeners may remember. And if you go onto our platform and you're looking for information on Parkinson's disease, this is the person that you want to connect with. And we are very honored to have Leanna Marie back with us. And just for you that may be familiar or trying to remember Leanna, Leanna is the author of The Complete Guide for People with Parkinson's Disease and Their Loved Ones, and everything you need to know about caregiving for Parkinson's. And she has a new upcoming book, The Parkinson's Path. And Leanna Marie, welcome back to Answers for Elders.
Thank you very much, Suzanne. Good to be here.
I know. I'm so glad you're here because, more and more every day we're hearing information about Parkinson's disease. It's not something that's like a misnomer. It's something that, the world is hearing, different people. And of course, we're learning a lot about the disease. And of course, we've been, as you know, I've connected you with Athera Pharma. They're doing a lot of testing. So there's a lot of hope, I think, in the world of, brain related illnesses. And you are one of the people that can help families out here. But I would really like Leanna to talk a little bit to you about your background and how you got into this world. I know your mom had Parkinson's, isn't that correct?
Yeah. I mean, it was, thank you for that question. I know a lot of people, if they've read any of my books, they have a little bit of background, but just to fill people in who don't, my mom had it for 30 years, which for many people, that's a long time. She got diagnosed when she was in her late 40s. And at that time, that was in the early 90s. That was a very young age for people with Parkinson's. Absolutely. Nowadays, it's quite common. We see people in their 30s or even their 20s get diagnosed with Parkinson's. But in the early 90s, and that was the same time that Michael J. Fox revealed he was also diagnosed, and he was in his late 20s at the same time. So it was kind of like my mom and Michael J. Fox, this parallel timeline where they were both living with Parkinson's. So anyway, so that was a long time ago. And for 30 years, she lived, I'd say probably 20 of those years were pretty good quality of life. It was near the end that, like many people who live with Parkinson's for that long, she developed dementia, unfortunately, and lived with that for about 8 years. But that's sort of, so I was her daughter, obviously. And, as the disease progressed, I was kind of her cheerleader at first, helping to find information to help her live a better life. And then that evolved to a little bit of more care partnering, if you will. And then at the very end, I would say, last 8 years or so, caregiving, more hands-on, and then advocating, which turned out to be a really important piece of the whole story in terms of getting my mom the best care that she could for where she was at. So it was a long, 3 decades. That's a good portion of my life anyways. And, I was only in my teens when she was diagnosed. And here I am I'm now the age that she was when she was diagnosed. So that's sort of the background to where my, if you will, my Parkinson's path. And I always say, a lot of people say when they ask me, "Oh, you wrote a book on Parkinson's. What's kind of like, how are you qualified to do that?" And so I say, well, my mom lived it for 30 years, and as you know, if you know anyone with Parkinson's, someone close to you, it's not just the person with Parkinson's that's living with the disease. No. It's the people that are closest to them. So correct. I can honestly say, no, I would never say, I could fully understand the pain that my mom went through at times, but I can tell you that we all live with it. I live with it. Her second husband lived with it. My family, close family members. So, it was a long journey.
And a lot of what you're saying, you use the word advocate. And I think that is really where a family doesn't necessarily know how to advocate in the best way. Or if they do, or, they don't necessarily know the right steps. And
Right.
so I'm assuming that a lot of your inspiration probably came through a lot of trial and error, a lot of, what did we do? How could we make things better in the future?
For
Tell
sure.
us a little bit about that.
Yeah. And actually that was the impetus to us writing the book, the first book
Yeah.
in the first place. Our original book was Everything You Need to Know About Parkinson's. And that stemmed from a conversation I was having at this kitchen table with my mom. And, this is like 10 years into her living with Parkinson's. And we had only just discovered that music, which she put on her little, back then it was an MP3 player, she put on her little earphones, and that would help her get out of freezing episodes. They call them in Parkinson's, freezing with
Right.
gait. So she'd get stuck in one spot. We'd put these earphones on, and almost 100% of the time, maybe 99% of the time, she could get out of those. So that was just one example of the various things we learned through living with Parkinson's, not out of a book, but we learned by living with Parkinson's. And so, a friend of mine said, you guys learned a lot about this. Have you ever thought about putting that together in a book? And at that time, we didn't have anything. It was mostly just doctor books, I call them, which is, those are great.
Yeah.
But at that time, there was nothing practical, and basically tips and tricks or lessons learned, if you will, or like you said, trial and error. Oh, this didn't work, or this worked. And that music piece was one key example of something that really helped my mom in many
Absolutely.
instances.
It's fascinating how the brain works.
Oh my
And
gosh.
I keep coming back to, I'm lucky in the fact that I've had the privilege of interviewing so many amazing experts on brain injuries and brain function and Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and all these different types of brain conditions, I guess is the word. And to have a resource like you that really helps families to pinpoint, because I think a lot of things that happens in this evolution of living with the loved one that is diagnosed with the disease, I'm sure for you found it, you found kind of a niche where a lot of families are looking for, but they don't necessarily know there's a resource out there. And I know you have an amazing website, but tell us a little bit about, the differences between your book. I am interested about you've got a new book coming out, which is called The Parkinson's Path, but you've written 2 other books. Explain the difference between the 3.
Sure. Yeah. And thank you. I think, like I said initially when we wrote the first book, it's sort of and it's been republished as the complete guide for Parkinson's. That's it's basically to cover all, all the different areas of Parkinson's that one might encounter. It's more, let's say my loved one or I have just been recently diagnosed. We talk about pretty much just about everything that you can think about. Hence the name Everything You Need to Know was the original name. And again, I clarify, a lot of people will say, oh, there's not everything in this book. And I said, no, you know what? We are not creating an encyclopedia for you. The idea is that we're trying to make things easier for you. So we will find the most important things that you need to know, because we don't want to overwhelm you. We know that now with the internet, it's absolutely insane how much information there is out there. So how can we take all that and bring it into one, concise book so that it will help people at the beginning of their journey? So that's the first book. The second book was for care partners, caregivers, people like myself, daughters, sons, but also in particular spouses who may be caring for someone with Parkinson's and mid to late stages of Parkinson's disease. And this one, though, this is the final one. I think I always say this is going to be the last one, who knows, but this third one is, over the years, people say, and it's true, that this illness is a snowflake illness, that Parkinson's is unique to everyone, which is absolutely true. Just because, I live with it for 30 years, somebody might live with it for 5 years. They may have different symptoms. There's so many different variations.
That makes sense.
However, yes, but there's one thing that I would argue is the same across the board, and that is the emotional journey or that people go on when they're living with a chronic illness like Parkinson's. And that is what I hear over and over and over again from people who are living with it, people I talk to who've read my books or have, been part of our Facebook, forums, etc., is that it's things like frustration. It's things like the sadness and the loss. It's also things, it's not all negative, but it's emotions. People are wondering, am I normal for feeling this way? Someone with Parkinson's, for example, or the care partner is asking me, what should I do about this? I feel like, my life has just completely changed. And what do I do about this? So a lot of it is feel. I feel this. And I realize that, in looking back over the journey with my mom, there really were, some commonalities that we experienced across the board with many others that are living with the disease. And so I've written a book that goes through, honestly, if you go through the 30 years, I've listed, I go through the 30 most common emotions that we went through and how we worked through them, what we did about them, and give some practical ways that we, navigated through that part, each challenge, if you will. And how, like I said, it wasn't just all bad stuff. It was, some things happened that, quite honestly, I hate using the word joyful because people might think that's odd to say in relationship to a chronic illness, but there were a lot of moments of joy that we experienced throughout Mom's illness. And really, what are our options? You don't want to just, you get diagnosed with Parkinson's. What are you going to do? You're going to give up? No. So we, one of my favorite quotes is from someone with Parkinson's said, and I think everyone has probably heard this before, but Parkinson's is not the end of your life. It's the beginning of a new one. And for us,
very good.
Yeah. So that's sort of what the Parkinson's path is all about.
Fabulous. And so coming up in our next segment, Leanna and I are going to talk about what it's like to be a daughter and a caregiver with someone that has Alzheimer's. And we'll be right back right after this.
The preceding Parkinson's Path podcast is provided by Leanna Marie with All About Parkinson's and Answers for Elders Radio. To learn more about Leanna's story, her books, The Parkinson's Wall of Honor, and more, go to allaboutparkinsons.com.